And what is up, Bridge Point Church? How you doing this morning? Good. We're glad that you're here on a special kind of our celebration of Christmas. I love everything to do with Christmas. In fact, we took a poll at the beginning of this year. I talked about just the joy we have in all these things and getting prepared for Christmas. How many of you right now, it's 2 days before Christmas, how many of you are everything's ready for Christmas, presents wrapped, everything's done? That is awesome. You're way ahead of schedule. How many of you have a lot of work still to do? How many men still have some shopping to do? Yeah, I got you. Even some ladies like, I'll claim that one as well. Listen, I make no apologies about it. I love Christmas. I love everything about Christmas. I love the decorations. I love the lights, the tinsel, the garland. I love everything. Christmas trees, the wreaths, all that stuff. There's a festive feeling that hits our nation as soon as December rolls around. I love Christmas food. I love the cookies and the Christmas lunch and everything that comes. Everyone's like, listen, my diet starts in January. Christmas, all the stuff doesn't count. We love our Christmas food. I love being able to hang out with family and friends that maybe we don't see the rest of the year. But somehow because we say this time is really important, I want to create space for us to be able to enjoy the company of family and friends that we wish we could see the rest of the year, but we don't. I love the fact that we take time during Christmas to be able to do that. I love the fact this year that as a church, we took time to say we want to slow down a portion of the service, and for many of us, a portion of our lives to celebrate Advent, to focus on what really the significance of Christmas is all about. I love presents. I love giving and receiving presents. I've learned as I've gotten older that I love the former more than I do the latter, but I love both of those things because there's something that is both exhilarating and exhausting about the way our culture has kind of grown around this custom of giving presents. You see, there's something that's a little bit exhilarating about the idea that life is kind of reciprocal, and we kind of teach our kids that we earn at the end of the year kind of what we've worked up to that point, that we learn this reciprocal idea that I receive in direct proportion to what I give. So at the end of the year, based upon the things that we've done, we receive our Christmas presents. Based upon that which we've done. I don't know if the bag's going to stay still or not, but we think about that and we think, well, actually no one deserves to get cold. No one's getting cold for Christmas. And Mom, though you might threaten the kids and say, if you don't behave, I'm going to put these presents up, there's a good chance that come Christmas morning, those presents are still going to be under the tree. Like we know that is the case, but there's something that we've learned. I think it's ingrained in our culture from the time we're young about the idea of receiving in direct proportion to that which we give. We learn a lot of life is what we call reciprocal. In other words, if I do A and B, that I'm going to get the C result that I desire to have. And we learn this from the time that we're very young. We learn as children that if we study hard, that we're going to make good grades. If we do our homework, we're going to make good grades. We learn as a young child that when it comes to our parents, if I behave, if I listen to Mom and Dad, I'm going to be rewarded. If I don't listen, if I get in trouble, I'm going to get punished. As we start to grow up a little bit, maybe we start playing sports. And we learn that if I practice hard, that I'm going to make the team. And if I make the team and I continue to practice hard, well, then I could become a starter. I could really do something with the sport that I'm playing. As we get older in high school, we learn that if we continue to apply ourselves in school, we work hard, make good grades, we get into the college of our choice. If we don't do those things, we continue to pursue whatever life has for us in the future, and we go and we get jobs, then at my position in my job or my career, I learn that if I work hard to pay attention to management and do the things I'm supposed to do, I get things like raises and promotions. There's part of that when it comes to stuff, just to stuff, that's exhilarating. If you're in a position right now where you're working for a career and you work hard, maybe that meant this year you got a Christmas bonus. And that Christmas bonus excited you. It had you exhilarated when it comes to stuff because it makes us want to work harder for stuff. But that same premise doesn't work as well when it comes to relationships. That's where what's exhilarating becomes exhausting. Now, I don't think that we mean this as parents. In fact, I'm pretty sure we don't mean this. But sometimes the message that our kids hear, because we want our children to behave, the message our children hear is, well, if you don't behave, then we're not communicating this, but what they hear is you're not going to be loved as much. And if you misbehave or if you do these things wrong, then the same love is going to be there. So we don't mean it. We try and respond and reward them based upon good behaviors. But sometimes the message that's communicated is, if I want mom and dad to appreciate me and to show me affection and attention, those things that I crave, well, then I better behave. And so at some point it leaves children thinking, I have to compete for my parents' attention and affection. Because we learned this idea when it came to stuff, we started to apply it where it wasn't meant to be applied. And the same thing happened when we started to wrestle with the ideas of faith. Now, I know it's Christmas season, so that means some people show up at church because it's Christmas, and maybe they're not there yet. Maybe you're sitting there saying, I'm not sure about this whole Jesus thing and him coming to earth, and I'm here to say that's fine. We're here to have a discussion this morning. But sometimes the danger that we have is, whether we've been in church for a long time or not, is that we apply some of these same principles that we've learned about stuff, and we start to apply that to relationships. And even when it comes to the relationship with God, we think, well, we have to perform for God's attention, and we have to perform for God's affection, because it's just kind of the culture that's been ingrained in our psyche from the time that we're young. And so sometimes it's people who've never been to church before who just think that's how the world works. And oftentimes it's even people who've been going to church for a long time who just think, I'm going to earn God's affection based upon the good work that I do, and I'm going to keep working harder. And what happens is, a lot of people at some point in their journey, either towards Christ or their journey when they're actually in Christ, is they get so frustrated and stagnated because it feels like I have to keep performing. When in reality, the event that we celebrate today, and really for those of us who follow Jesus, the event that we celebrate our whole year but culminates in what we celebrate today, is this idea of the song that we just sang, that love came down. You see, prior to Jesus' arrival here on earth, the people, especially his people, the Jewish people, they were longing for a deliverer to come because they had encountered so much hardship in their life. They encountered captivities and imprisonments, and they just wanted absolute freedom. And they thought, man, if a deliverer can show up, and if a deliverer could just grant freedom into our lives, that's all we long for. And so there was this long-awaited hope and expectation that a deliverer, the Messiah, was going to come. And he was going to come as this mighty king, this ruler that was going to forever free them and liberate them from the external stuff. And into that hope, into that dream, the deliverer came not as a mighty king, but as a baby. We read the account, an account that if you grew up in church at all, you might have memorized this as a child. If you watch the Peanuts, the Snoopy Christmas special, you heard them recite this. In those days, a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be registered. This was the first registration when Quirinius was governor of Syria. And all went to be registered, each to his own town. And Joseph also went up from Galilee, from the town of Nazareth to Judea, to the city of David, which is called Bethlehem, because he was of the house and lineage of David, to be registered with Mary, his betrothed, who was with child. And while they were there, the time came for her to give birth. And she gave birth to her firstborn son, and she wrapped him in swaddling clothes and laid him in a manger, because there is no place for them in the inn. Now, chances are, if you're a church or in church, you've probably heard versions of that in the past. But I want us to contemplate this idea this morning, that when Jesus came, he didn't come as everyone expected him to come. He came as a baby, not to deliver the Jewish people from the physical oppression that they were experiencing, but to deliver all of us from an emotional and spiritual oppression that we had been encountering then, and I think for many of us today, we're still encountering. You see, throughout this season of Advent, we've been lighting different candles around the Advent wreath. Not something we typically do it here at Ridge Point Church, but we want to slow this season down and to focus on what's really significant, what's really important about this season. And so each of the candles that was lit in celebration of a different aspect of what we celebrate when Jesus comes here to earth. We celebrate him coming, and with coming, he brings hope and he brings peace. With his coming, he brings joy. And today we celebrate the idea that he brings love. But not just the love that the world had known up until that point, and not even the love that we think we experience today, because for most of us, the love that we think we experience today is often a reciprocal love itself, whether we mean to or not. A lot of times we love people who we think are going to love us in return. And we think that's how life works, and honestly, if we keep trying to do that, it gets exhausting. You see, around December, when it comes to the house that has young kids, it's easy to say to a young child that, hey, you better be good for goodness sake because Christmas is coming. But if you started that in February, it would not work very long. If you start in February saying, hey, if you're not good, Christmas is coming, the kids are like, listen, by March, I'm done with this whole discussion. You're going to forget anyway. Like it wouldn't work. Well, the same thing's true if we base relationships upon reciprocal love. See, when Jesus came into the earth, the followers of Jesus started to grasp the story that he was telling. They started to grasp the teaching that he had, which was so unlike anything else. You see, most of even the religious system of Jesus' day, whatever the religious system was that people adhered to, most of the religious system had to do with the same system that has been developed in our psyche from the time that we're young. If you do this, this is going to be your result. Jesus came, and because of his teachings, and because of the effect of his followers, they practically had to coin a brand new term to describe it. You see, if you've been around church at all, you've probably heard the term, the Greek term, the Bible, the New Testament was originally written in Greek. You've probably heard the term agape. In fact, that might be the only Greek word, church or not, that might be the only Greek word that everybody I've heard that before. I identify with that because it's been told to us that is like this self-sacrificing, this godly love. And the thing is that as we look at that, in fact, if you were to real quick, just get on your computer or on your smartphone this afternoon, and if you're just to Google real quick the word agape, A-G-A-P-E, if you were to Google agape, one of the first things that pops up is the Wikipedia article about agape. And it says about agape that agape was a Greco-Christian term, meaning that it had been used a couple of times prior to Jesus, but it had been used in some very obscure references. But once Jesus comes here, they adopt that term, and they say, this is how we're going to live. Because two things we know. Number one is that Jesus brought a love that was unconditional. Jesus brought a love that was unconditional. In other words, there were no strings attached to it. Everything the world knew up until this agape love was that there were strings attached to any type of relationship. But Jesus came and said, I'm going to show you love that transcends anything you've ever seen. In fact, this is the significance of us celebrating the birth of Jesus. As he says, I'm going to come and deliver a whole new type of love, a love this world has never seen, and a love this world has never experienced. A love that says the relationship's not going to be based upon the things that you do. You see, over time, that type of relationship gets wearisome. It gets just exhausting. If I felt like my role as a husband, if I felt like my role as a son, if I felt like even my role as a father was based entirely upon my performance on each individual day, I hate to burst a bubble and for you to think the pastor's always perfect, because he's not. And so if my relationship was with anybody was based upon my performance that day, well, that'd be exhausting, and eventually all those relationships would fail. But Jesus came and said, I want to make this relationship not based upon your performance, but instead I want to base a relationship predicated entirely upon the love that I have for you. A love that says that whether we succeed or fail on a day-to-day basis, because every one of us is going to fail, that whether we succeed or fail on a day-to-day basis, the love is not going to be lost. It's not saying that our actions don't matter. That's not the point at all. But it's saying that the love isn't going to fail based upon your actions on a particular day, which was the main religious idea of his day. And Jesus says, I don't want to predicate it upon those things. Instead, I want to predicate it upon love. A love that does this. A love that looks at your life and it looks at my life. And if at the end of my life, instead of me getting a present, I'm given what I deserve, I wouldn't receive coal necessarily. I'd receive death. But Jesus says, my whole coming is not to base it upon the things that you've done, but rather the things that I am doing. And so instead of coal, Jesus looks at us and says, what I'm going to give you is I'm going to give you life. And he says, in fact, I'm going to take away the very idea of judgment that you thought was coming, and I'm going to cover that up. And I'm going to give you life. And I'm going to give you eternity. In fact, I've written eternity on your heart. This is who you are. And so in place of the death that you think that you deserve, I'm going to give you eternity. And on top of that, not only are you going to live for eternity, but I'm going to give you heaven, that you're going to get to be with me literally in a place where streets are made of gold. All of this is going to be yours, because the most important thing that I'm giving you in place of the judgment that you deserve, in place of the judgment that I deserve. I don't get coal, I don't get death. Instead, I get life. I get eternity. I get heaven, because at the end of the day, regardless of my successes or failures, because of my relationship with God through his Son, he says, I give you love. And love covers all of that. And so today, if I succeed or if I fail, my relationship with God is not based upon, the relationship itself is not based upon the things that I do. It's based upon Jesus coming to earth, ultimately to die in my place. And I rest comfortably in that. You see, if my relationship was predicated upon my successes or failures, I'd be spinning my tires all the time, feeling like I'm going nowhere, because all of us are broken. All of us make mistakes. So this morning, if you're sitting there saying one of two things, if you're sitting there saying, man, I've been coming to church, or maybe this is the first time I've ever been to church, and I come and I just feel like, man, I can't connect with God because of my past, because of the mistakes that I've made, Jesus is coming saying, listen, I want to erase all of that junk in your life, because all of that stuff doesn't have to mark you. That all it takes is having a relationship with me, and I'm going to erase your death with life. I'm going to erase your death with eternity. I'm going to erase your death with heaven, and I'm going to replace your death with love. Because Jesus brought a love that was unconditional. But the second part of that is Jesus taught a love that was unrestricted. Jesus brought a love that was unconditional. It wasn't based upon conditions of what we needed to do, but what he did for us. But then he taught us as followers of his to love as he loved. In fact, in 1 John 4, verse 19, it says, we love, we agape, because he first loved us. The very reason why we love is because he first loved us. The most famous verse in all of Scripture is John 3:16, that says, for God so agape the world, God so loved the world, that he gave his Son so that we could have eternal life. And because of that love, it says we love because he first showed us that love. But it wasn't just a love the world had come to know. It was a love that was transcendent. If we flip back just a couple of books to the Gospel of Matthew, there's a lot of places where Jesus teaches this brand new form of love. He teaches us to love the very way that he loved, a love that was transcendent and it was different. And he says this in Matthew chapter 5, verse 43. You have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. You see, it makes sense to live life this way because this is the reciprocal type of love. I love my neighbors, I love my friends, I love my family, at least for most of us, most of our family. because that love can be reciprocated. I love my neighbors that I get along with because they love me, but if we fight, I don't love them anymore. That's reciprocal love. Jesus says, you've heard it said, people have taught this, even religious people have taught this, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But he says, but I say to you, love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be sons of your Father who is in heaven. For he makes his sun rise on the evil and on the good. He sends rain on the just and on the unjust. For if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? Do not even the tax collectors do the same? The tax collectors were kind of the lowest of the low. They're the corrupt people, the people who are always in it for their personal gain. And so he says, listen, if you only love people that are going to love you in return, if you only scratch the back of people who are going to scratch your back in return, are you really getting anywhere? Because even the tax collectors, the people considered the lowest of the low, they get that. But he says, I'm teaching this new form of love. Verse 47, if you greet only your brothers, what more are you doing than others? Do not even the Gentiles do the same? He says, listen, this reciprocal type of love, everybody gets that type of love. Like if you're in the workforce and you're trying to build your career, it's very easy to form alliances and relationships with people who, man, I can help them out because later on, if I do them a favor, they're going to owe me a favor. And that's kind of what we've always understood about relationships. And Jesus comes in and says, I want to show you what love is by bringing a love that's unconditional, but I want to teach you what love is by teaching you a love that's unrestricted. You see, when I was in 3rd or 4th grade, I was 7 or 8 years old, maybe 9. I loved playing sports. There's a group of us, we're all going to elementary school together. We kind of grown up together. And there were a group of probably 8 or 10 of us in my class in 3rd or 4th grade that we just, anytime there was free time at all, we'd be outside on the playground playing football most every day. If we had recess, PE, whatever it was, we'd be out there playing football. And there was a couple of us that were really athletic, would really love to do this all the time. And there's one guy who was really good. He was always the quarterback. His name was Josh Badgley. And Josh was this incredible person. Everyone liked him. He was probably the most popular student in our class. Everybody loved Josh. One day, Josh and I were both staying after school in our extended care program, and it was really hot. We grew up in Florida, so of course it was hot. We get like one cold day a year, and this is it. So it was hot, and we're sweating, and we got done playing, and my mom picked me up first. Josh was still waiting for his parents to get there, and he was really hot. And Josh turned to me at 7 or 8 years old or 9 years old, and he says, JJ, if your mom can give you money for me to get a soda from the soda machine, I'll be your best friend. Listen, we laugh at that now, but for a 7 or 8 year old, that's like waving a red cape in front of a bull. I'm like, dude, Josh is so cool. Everyone likes him, and I'm going to be his best friend. It's only going to cost me 35 cents. Because that's what Cokes cost back then, was 35 cents. And you put it in the metal machine, and the coins went down. And so I said, Josh, here's a quarter, and here's a dime. We put it in the machine, and I bought Josh a soda, and he became my best friend. We know as adults that's a terrible way to build a relationship, but at 7 or 8, that's what we learn. The truth is that we know that's not good, but we have a tendency to do it over and over again. We think that relationships can be predicated upon the things that we do. And if we do those things well enough, the people are going to show us favor, and in turn, we're going to show favor to people who can scratch our back as well. I'll give you 35 cents if you're my best friend. It's reciprocal. Jesus came to demonstrate to us a love that was unconditional. But he also came to teach us a love that was unrestricted. A love that says, don't just help out your friends. Love your enemies as well. If someone hurts you, it's okay. Pray for them and serve them. And that was so transcendent to anything the world knew back then. And I got news for us. It's transcendent to the world that we live in today. We live in a world that's very me first and focused on me, and I'll love if I can be loved in return. Jesus came to first demonstrate what love is, but then in turn to teach us how to love. Let's pray together. Father, I thank you for teaching us the idea of unconditional love. For there's not one of us that's here this morning that deserves to even be able to stand before you. God, what we deserve is a big pile of coal. We deserve death. But because of the grace, because of the love of Jesus, God, you give us life. So this morning I want to pray for two groups of individuals in particular. The first, God, I believe there are people here who've been searching maybe their whole life for just the reality of the love that you have. And God, it has been exhausting for them because they have been working so hard at trying to please people that they've never heard this message that your love is free, it's unconditional. That Jesus came to display to us agape love. God, for that person who's as far away from Christ as possible, that's been working so hard and had so many questions, God, I pray today is the day that the conflict of their life is removed and they encounter Jesus for the first time themselves this morning. But God, I also pray today for the person that might just be overly religious. God, they've been coming to church, they've been hearing messages like this maybe their whole life. They've been involved, they've been serving, they've been supporting. But God, if they're honest right now, life feels exhausting. Their spiritual journey just feels exhausting. It's because we've fallen into a trap that we all fall into from time to time, where it just feels like our relationship is predicated upon the things that we do and not on the free gift of Jesus. God, for the person this morning that's not religious at all, and for the person this morning that's overly religious, God, I pray today is the day that they discover Jesus and the freedom that he brings and the ability he brings to bring hope, to bring peace, to bring joy, and to bring love into their life. For it's in his name we pray. Amen.